In Hebron, and I start here intentionally. We start here for a reason. When we came in, and we stopped by the tomb of the Patriarchs. In Hebrew, it's called Marat Machpelah. We'll go back there later. That site, I think probably everybody knows, is where Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah and Rebecca were all buried. However, a lot of times tourists come in, and they say to me, it's nice to see the tomb, but where did they live? And that's why I start up here. This neighborhood has three names to it. It's commonly known as Tel Rumeida. The word Rumeida in Arabic has to do with something like ash gray. There was a fire here a few thousand years ago and the name stuck. This is also called in Hebrew Admot Ishai, a name which I'll explain in a little while later. However, the third name is the real name of the neighborhood. This is called Tel Hebron. This is where Abraham lived almost 4,000 years ago. Now, up until a few years ago, we could just talk about it. Now you can actually see a little bit of it, okay? If you take a look over here on my my right, over here you can see all of these rocks here. This is a wall. Today this wall is 3 meters high. It used to be 10 meters high. So add another one and another one plus a little more, and that's how high it was. Over here, now this wall is, according to the archaeologists, was built between 43 to 4,500 years ago. 4,500 years ago, put it on a timeline. We're not going back to days of Abraham, I'm sorry. We're going back to days of Noah. That's when this wall was built. This wall over here on the other side is a little bit newer. This wall is only 3,700 years old. It was built during the days of Abraham. However, as far as I'm concerned, the most important find here are not the two walls, but what's in between them. You see these stairs. These stairs were discovered as you see them. Okay, nobody put them back together again. They're over 4,000 years old. The stairs led, going on the side of by the sides of the walls, up. Whoever was controlling the city could look down and determine whether they liked the guest or not. If they did, they'd let them in. If they didn't, they'd find a way to get rid of them. And the truth is that really the most important find here isn't what we see, it's what we don't see. Because if we kept going up the stairs, about where those soldiers are right now, the archaeologists say if they kept digging there in the street, right there, okay, picked us today. If they dug right up there where the people are walking, where Gila is right now, maybe she's going to go try to stop the airplanes. But if they dug right there, they think they would find the gates to Hebron. Now the gate, they don't know if it was an archway or if it was a double gate like this, but that's where they think people coming up the stairs from below would come up to the gate, they would open it, and people could go in. As far as I'm concerned, this is probably, even though there are no signs there, and we walk there and we drive there, probably it's one of the most important places there is today in the land of Israel. Why is that so? Because if you go back and read in the Bible about how Abraham purchases the tomb of the Patriarchs almost 4,000 years ago, you know, it says that he paid 400 silver shekels for that site. It was a tremendous amount of money. It's like $1 million today. And the amazing thing is that the guy that sold it to him, Ephron the Hittite, wanted to give it to him. He said, here, take it for free. And Abraham said no. Now, I don't know, somebody came and knocked on your door, you open it up, and they hand you the keys, and they say, see outside that new BMW? That's yours. Free. And you say, free? Nah, come on in. I got to write you a check. You got to be crazy, right? But that's what Abraham did. He said, I don't want the keys for free. I want to pay for it. And he signed a contract, and he put 400 silver shekels down on the table. Why did he do that? Because he knew the site was so holy, and later when we go down there, we'll talk more about that. It was so holy, he realized that if he didn't pay for it, that one day somebody was going to say to him, you know, it really doesn't belong to you. We let you use it, but now we want it back. How can you make sure that never happens? Sign the contract, put money down on the table, and nobody can ever say that it doesn't belong to you. There are 3 places like that today in Israel. Joseph's tomb we paid money for. Temple Mount we paid money for. And the tomb of the Patriarchs we paid money for. Okay? Abraham pays 400 silver shekels. Do you remember, though, where it says in the Bible that that transaction was carried out? It says at the gates to the city gates. City gates are right there. It's very, very possible, maybe even probable, that that's where Abraham stood 3,700 years ago, and purchased Marat HaMachpelah for the Jewish people. And it's an amazing, amazing thought to think that there he is then, and here we are today. When Abraham bought the tomb of the Patriarchs for that much money, he wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about us. He was thinking thousands of years into the future that his offspring should be able to come and pray at that site, to be able to worship at that site, to be able to identify with their roots at that very site. And that all started right here. These stairs for me are a bridge between Abraham and today. The fact that we're still here, I don't know what it does to you, it blows my mind. Okay, it all started right here. This is the beginning of our tour of Hebron at the very, very roots of where we all started. Now we're going to continue down a little bit. Please follow me. Okay. In back of me at the moment are two houses. Okay, there's a house back here which is about 4,000 years old. You can see it in the corner over here. But there's another one, and that's this one right here. You can see the pillars here. This side 3 and that side 3. These are pillars of a house that was built about 2,700 years ago, during the days of King Hezekiah. Now, you know, a lot of times people today turn on the radio, the TV, they look at the newspapers, and they think that we have problems. Well, I've got news for you. They had problems then too. Because back 2,700 years ago, they had a problem with another king that had this thing about fire. He liked to burn down cities. Okay? And he came to visit in Hebron also. And back here, I'm going to run away from the cameras for a minute. When we're finished talking, you can come around and you'll see on the back pillar, the third pillar, you can see black. You don't see it from where you are. You have to come around this way. There's a black spot on the top stone of the third pillar. They think that that black is from the fire that was here 2,700 years ago when Sancheriv came and burned down Hebron. Now, during that period of time, the kingdom used Hebron as a place to store food for the army. And they used to store the food in these clay jars. The clay jars were about so big, and they had a little handle on the side. And they used to store the grains and whatever they had inside the jars. Now, on the bottom of the handle was a little seal. It was very small. It was maybe this big. And it looked like a beetle. Some of them had 2 wings, some of them had 4 wings. And on the top of the seal, usually it had written the word Lamelech, to the king. And this identified this jar as property of the kingdom. You know, today it says property of the U.S. government. I could tell you jokes, but I don't know whether I should with the cameras going. I was once, you know, the Queen is now visiting in the United States. I was once in England and I went into the Parliament. And you'll never guess what I found written, what I had found written on it that said property of the British government. Where we all go, you know, sometimes in the paper there it says, in any case, I'm serious, but in any case, they have these seals. On the top of the seal it has Lamelech, to the king. On the bottom of the seal, underneath, is another word which identifies the area where these jars are being stored. There were 4 storage areas in the Jordanian area, in the Judean region. They found here 7 seals. All of them on the top of the seal say Lamelech, to the king. Underneath them in ancient Hebrew was written the word Hebron. And when they found these seals, the archaeologists said to us, if anybody had any doubts as to whether this was the authentic biblical Hebron, those doubts have all been erased. They said, we have positive proof that the Jews have lived here since the days of Abraham. So again, you want to talk about our roots, very, very difficult. And when I speak about our roots, I'm not just speaking about the roots of Judaism, I'm speaking about the roots of all of monotheism. We all start from the same place. We start with Abraham. We start with a belief in one God, and that starts right here. This is it. This is the beginning of everything. So here we have, over there we saw the walls. Here we have a house, 2,700 years old. Back up in the corner, difficult to see, there are wine cisterns that go back about 1,500 years. So in a very, very small area, we've got 1,500 years, 2,700 years, 3,700 years, and 4,500 years. Very, very small area, not very deep. This is Tel Hebron. Now, of course, there's one very important time period very important for us and for Hebron that I haven't mentioned. And I'm going to keep you in suspense for a little while. We'll talk about that in a little while. But I always figure if I keep people in suspense, there's less of a chance they'll go to sleep. So we'll hold on with that for a little while. We're now going to jump from the past into the present. You know, in Hebron, the past and the present and even the future all tend to blend together. So we'll leave going back 2,700 years ago and come to today. We came back to Hebron exactly 40 years ago. Next week, next Thursday, 40 years ago, we came back to Hebron during the Six-Day War. We came then, following that, on Passover of the next year in 1968, a group of Jews came to Hebron to celebrate the Passover holidays. They rented a hotel, spent the week at the hotel. When the holiday was over and they decided to stay, the Israeli government went into action, as they're very good at doing. They try to expel people from different places here. Then they said to the people, you can't stay in the middle of Hebron. If you really want to live here, you have to go live up in the Hebron military compound, a very, very large building that existed up in the hills. And they opted for that. And contrary to what the government had thought at that time, they stayed. Usually, you know, military complexes are not really conducive to, you know, everyday life, babies, things like that. These people lived there for 2.5 years until the first buildings in Kiryat Arba, which is just outside Hebron, were finished. They moved up there in September of 1971. The goal was to come back to Hebron. How exactly we came back to live in Hebron itself, I'll tell you in a little while when we go to our next stop. This neighborhood that we're in right now, we came back to in 1984. The government, with its tremendous generosity, gave us 24 hours. They said, whatever you get up here in 24 hours, that's what there is and nothing else. And over a period of 24 hours, we got up here what we call caravans, 7 caravan homes, the things you see in back of us. The 8th one was still hanging on the crane when the clock ran out. And you know what happened when the clock runs out? You know, the fairy mother turns into a witch. The crane disappeared. The 8th one stayed on the hook. They wouldn't let it down. And that's the way people lived here for many years in these 7 caravan homes. 8.5 years ago, very, very tragically, very, very unfortunately, there was a terrorist attack here. An Arab managed to get through the back window of one of the homes over here and stabbed to death a 63-year-old rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Ra'anan. If you've heard of the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel, it was prior to the state, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cohen Cook, it was his grandson. Following that murder, the then Prime Minister Netanyahu promised us that we would be able to build and get out of the caravans. In order to build here in Hebron, first you have to dig. Because everybody knew this was ancient, the excavations were done. By the time these excavations were finished, Netanyahu was no longer Prime Minister, and everything here froze. We eventually received the permits we needed, and following that, we were able to build Tzipi. Shalom. We eventually, 2 years ago, we had the dedication for this building, and we have 7 families living here today, as well as a Torah study hall in memory of Rabbi Ra'anan. We have people still in the caravans, and hopefully one of these days we'll get the caravans out, continue to dig, find whatever we find, and continue to build as we've done here. Now, את מוכנה להגיד שלום שנייה? מוכנה להגיד להם שלום? מה? Stop. Now, as we're standing and talking here, one of the women that lives here came by. The story that I just told you about the rabbi who was murdered here, this is his daughter who lives here. Her husband is the dean of the study hall up here. And I thought that if she came by, that it might be just nice for her just to say a word or two. Like to ספרי להם איך משפחה גרה במקום כזה. This woman's name is Mrs. Tzipi Schlissel, and she's been living in Hebron here for a number of years. And I just thought that maybe if she was walking by, she could just say hello to you for a minute.
People that came by asked my father, how come you live in such a house, a caravan? He said that he had the schut to live in the place that the palace of David, King David was, and this lay everything. I think he meant the book that we have here, our connections to Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Through all the history that the Jewish nation came and brought in this place, give us the koach, the power, and the happiness to be here. And thank you that you came. Thank you.
Toda rabah, Tzipi, Ken.
Dress while you're on camera. What happens if Netanyahu gets elected? How do people feel about it?
Okay. So basically, Toda rabah, Tzipi. Just to get to hear another voice, sometimes it's nice to hear somebody else speaking too. So basically that's how we came to be here, and that's the way that the situation is at the moment. There's more here that we'll go and see in a moment. Excuse me, one of the questions that was just addressed to me was what is going to happen should our old friend Bibi Netanyahu be again elected to the office of Prime Minister. That's a very good question. The truth is I have no idea. Look, I'll tell you the truth. When Bibi Netanyahu was elected, following the beginning of Oslo and the Rabin Peres regime, which for us was, to say it was catastrophic would be, making light of it. It was extremely, extremely traumatic. And we thought, mistakenly so, that Bibi Netanyahu was like the Messiah. And we thought that everything was going to change. And following his election, in the beginning then there was a little war after he was elected, when our neighbors started to use the guns that we'd given them to shoot at our soldiers. That fall during the Sukkot holidays, we thought that the Hebron Accords here would definitely fall, that he would never go through with that. And of course, we were greatly, greatly in error. And he did go through with it. And that taught us a very important lesson for people that thought otherwise, people that didn't realize. The same thing happened to a lesser degree again when Ariel Sharon was elected, and we saw what he did. They get progressively worse. We've reached a pinnacle with Olmert. What will happen when Bibi Netanyahu is reelected? If he's reelected, people are very, very concerned about what we've seen what he has the potential to do, and it's not good. He also has a potential, God gave us a wonderful gift called free choice, and you can use it this way and you can use it that way. You can have people that have a tremendous amount of charisma and power, and they can turn into people who are very, very positive, or they can do, God forbid, the opposite. And we've seen both sides. And Netanyahu has definitely the potential to go either way. I don't think that Netanyahu is an evil person. I think that he has a very weak character, and he's very influenced by external kinds of things, superficial things, which damage his ability to control himself and to implement the positive as opposed to the other. Very difficult to know what Bibi Netanyahu will do. If we had our choice, probably we would prefer that somebody else be elected prime minister. Then, of course, you will smile and say, who? And I will smile back and say, I don't know. Now, look, the way Israeli politics works, there are people today that I think could be suitable to be prime minister. Unfortunately, the way the Israeli political system works, they have no chance today to be elected. But I will say something else, okay? One of the questions that I'm frequently asked by journalists and also by tourists is about the children. This area where we're standing right now came under attack. We were shot at for 2 years in Hebron. From September, October of the year 2000 through April, May of 2002, we came under attack from the hills that surround us. You'll see those hills in a little while. We'll walk around and you'll see them. These hills were transferred to the PA back as part of the Hebron Accords, and we warned them that we would be shot at, and then we were shot at. These caravans are all full of bullet holes. Some of them have been repaired, but they're all full of bullet holes. from the shooting that took place from the hills to the north of us over here called Har el-Sheikh. And people ask, what about the children? Isn't it traumatic for the children? What's going to happen to them? My own apartment, down where I live, we'll go there later, is Beit Hadassah. 2 of my kids were missed by bullets that flew through our window by literally that much, and I'm not exaggerating. So then you say, so what happens to children like that? So I can tell you from my own experience that one of those 2 girls who missed being shot by that much is married with her own children, and she still lives in Hebron. She didn't leave. Okay, she stayed here. Okay? I think that one of the necessities for true leadership, number 1 is faith. And the children in Hebron have a lot of faith. We all do, because you can't live here without faith. The hand of God, at least during those days, it still is today, but today it's more wrapped up in nature. But in those days you could feel it, because if he didn't move you or he didn't move the bullets, then there would have been people killed here every day. It was just, that's the way it was. The kids in Hebron are growing up with such tremendous faith and such tremendous strength. I mean, somebody asked before where I come from. I grew up in New Jersey, okay? The other side of the world from you people, okay? I've been in Israel now for over 30 years, but that's where I grew up. And what my children have lived through growing up, I could never have even dreamt of or imagined. It would have been science fiction. It would have been bad science fiction, okay? But that's what the kids here have grown up with. And not only have they grown up with it, but they want to stay in, they want more. In other words, they understand that this is their land. And only people with nerves of platinum who can stand up under the pressures of the Saudi Arabians and the Americans and the European Union and their own left wing, okay? Only people with nerves that can stand up through that and have faith. They have such faith that they know that this is our land. This belongs to us. Tel Hebron is the roots of the Jewish people. You take this and you cut it off. What happens if you take a tree and you cut off the roots? These children are going to be, what you're asking, the future leadership of the Jewish people. And you want to know something? There are times when I've said that to journalists, and later I see it, and it scares them. These kids, these children that are growing up here, you know why we wear kippot on our heads, to cover the horns, right? But it scares them. It scares them. But I think that this is what the world needs. The world needs people that are willing to stand up to the threats that we're facing from all around us, from the Islamic word, from the barbarism of fundamental Islam, which wants to basically take all of us and turn us into good, God-fearing Muslims, right? And they have to be able to stand up for what is rightfully theirs, this land right where we're standing right here. That's the kind of leadership we need. It's developing, and I think that within the next few generations, I hope while I'm still around, and if not me, when my children are, this is going to be the true leadership that we're going to see coming out of Israel, and I hope that that will be really a light unto everybody all over the world. I think that's the best answer to your question. Any other questions here about this? Yes?
Will you continue to excavate here at all?
Look, this area is done. Here they found what they can find. They hit bedrock, okay? We've gone back here 4,500 years. They don't expect to find anything else here. Around here, this side, they expect to find something, what we don't know. We can keep going up. There are other areas. In a few minutes, we'll go to another place, which is also very important, which also, hopefully, one day will also be excavated. Excavations here are problematic for 2 reasons. Very, very expensive, and of course, everything in Israel is political. You're not allowed to breathe without getting a permit. Okay, and here they don't give us permits. We do it against the law. You'll pick up the jokes. Okay, please, I want to keep going. Please come with me up here. Okay. That building that we were standing underneath over there is something of a miracle, because that was a $2 million project. And unfortunately, I don't get paid that kind of money. We couldn't take care of it by ourselves. We did fundraising around the world. We went to a lot of people, and they said to us, we like you and we support you and we want to help you, but if we build a new building in Hebron, then basically we're going to be supporting your enemy, because in a few years it's going to go to them. There were other people who had what we were talking about, faith, and they said, if we really believe it's ours, we have to do something about it. And, it's not enough to talk about it. And they would put their money where their mouths were, and that's how we're able to do that. So that was really something of a miracle. However, it wasn't the biggest miracle here. There's another miracle that was even bigger than that. I mentioned to you on the bus that one of the problems we have is bringing in more people to live here. And that's not because there aren't people that want to live here. There are a lot of people that want to live in Hebron. The problem is where to put them. Why is there a problem where to put people to live? First of all of the apartments that we have presently are full. People come in, very rarely do they leave. So how can you expand? You can do one of two things. You can either build. However, to get building permits in Hebron is very difficult to do. You need to get permits that go up as high as the defense minister. And I'll tell you one of those secrets that I was going to mention. I don't know if this is on television. They'll probably execute me in Israel. But all of the defense ministers over the last 20 years, I don't know why, they all have congenital problems with their arms. And to get their hand to their pen and down to the piece of paper to sign can take a decade. So it's very difficult to get the building permits we need to build. The other way, of course, is to buy. It's something that's done all over the world. You want to get rid of your house, somebody wants to buy it, you sell it to them. All well and good until you come to the, it's not the Wild West, it's the Middle East. In the Middle East, there's a problem, especially here in Israel. Because if one of our neighbors wants to sell us his house, then he's summarily executed. They kill them. Okay, an Arab that sells property to a Jew is killed because he dared to sell property to a Jew, and they do it. The Palestinian Authority has taken upon themselves the law from the Jordanians saying that Arabs that sell property to Jews are to be killed. It's a capital crime. And they do it. There are land merchants that have been killed. There was a land merchant in Jerusalem maybe a year ago who not only did they kill him, but first they tortured him. Very difficult. In other words, if I want to buy from an Arab, then he has to live, I don't know, in Texas. That's the way it works. When the shooting was going on from the hills over here behind us, there was a guy that lived here named Abu Zakaria. And it got very noisy because they shot at us and the army was here and they used to shoot back. And he couldn't sleep well at night. He finally left. And a few years after he left, an Arab approached him and asked him if he wanted to sell his house. And he was ecstatic. He was going to get some money from for the place, and he wasn't going to have to live next to those crazy Jews, and he sold it to them. The only problem was he didn't know that the Arab that bought the house from him was working for us. Okay? So right now this house in back of us isn't the Abu Zakaria house, it's the Zakaria house. Okay? And now we have 3 families living upstairs. One of these days we're going to renovate down here, probably bring our kindergartens and nursery schools up here, have a big area for them to play. This was one of the times that it worked. So far, thank God. There are still people that don't want us here, and they'll go to any means. Here in Israel, the ends justify the means. Okay? However, we've been here for 2 years now, which is good. Hopefully we'll be here for much longer than that. This is one of those times when it really, really did work. There are other times that it's worked, and there are times when it hasn't. There are times we've purchased places like this, paid a lot of money for them, and then they pick us up and they throw us out. And then it takes a long time before we get back. However, this is one of the examples that worked. Now, standing here, one of the things, when we bought this house, not only we get that, we got the property. And having received the property, we have to add time for our tours because there's always something else to show people. And I always feel that if I don't bring people up here and show them what I'm going to show you now, I'm being negligent. So please follow me a little bit further. Okay, here we have one of the most beautiful views there is in Hebron. And all of those that are standing back there are going to have to move up a little bit because if you stand and look down, right there in front of us, down there in the middle, is the tomb of the Patriarchs. See that big building there with the walls around it? You see it with the minarets hanging up there in the corners and everything? Everybody see it? Yeah. Right down there, that's Ma'arat Machpelah. That's the tomb of the Patriarchs. One of the most beautiful views we have here. Now here I want to give you a little Bible lesson. We do Bible lessons here? Okay. Little Bible lesson. You may recall that it's written that during the days of Jacob, he lived up here, he decided that after his sons went to take a little stroll up north with the sheep, that he wanted to send his youngest one, Joseph, to go see how they were doing. So it's written in the Bible that that Jacob takes Joseph, and it says that he sends him from the valley of Hebron. Now, the commentators on the Torah, on the Bible, they all start to jump up and down at that line, and they say, what is the Torah talking about? They lived up here in the hills, so where's the valley? So they give different explanations about how God told Abraham that he was going to have to go down into a foreign land, and he was going to have to live there, and then he'd come back to Israel. And I won't go into the Hebrew parts of it because it fits in, but in any case, those are explanations that are given. When you stand up here and you look down there, you can see the literal part of what the Bible is talking about when it says that Jacob sent Joseph from the valley of Hebron. When you stand up here and look down there, you can see the valley. And you've got to keep in mind that that building is very old, but it was not there during the days of Jacob and Joseph. Okay? That's what the Torah is talking about. The valley of Hebron is talking about the tomb of the patriarchs, Ma'arat HaMachpelah. So then you'll ask yourselves, so why did, what does it mean? It means that Jacob took Joseph by the hand. It might have been a day like today. It was very hot. From what I've read, the electricity was out, no air conditioning, the buses, nothing. He had to walk all the way down there. He walked to the tomb of the patriarchs. He gave his son, Joseph, a hug and a kiss, and he said, on your way. And the question is, why he did that? I mean, we can see it very well there. We know that Jacob could have stood up here. He could have said to Joseph, when you get down there, wave, and I'll wave back. He had really good binoculars. We found them. Ancient binoculars. He would have seen him. He would have waved at him, and it would have been fine. Why did he take him down there? Why did he take him to that particular site? You know, Jacob knew that Joseph and his sons didn't get along too well. He knew that the brothers, they had problems between them. As all brothers had, they used to argue about who was going to get the teddy bear and who was going to, sit next to Jacob at the table for dinner. And Joseph was a favorite, and the other guys didn't like him so much. And he knew that he might have some trouble. He knew that it was a long walk from here up to the area of Shechem, all the way up north. So what can he give him to protect him? What can he give him to hold on to? He didn't have anything to give him. So what does he do? He takes him to the holiest place there is. We're talking about in the days pre-Jerusalem. He takes him to the tomb of Abraham, and we'll learn later on the importance of that site, the spiritual significance of that site, why Abraham bought it, why he wanted that cave and no other cave, okay? And he takes him to the holiest place that there is, and he says, soak in some of the sanctity. Maybe that will give you some inner strength that'll keep you going. And that's where he sent him from. When was the next time Jacob and Joseph saw each other? 22 years later. That's how long they were parted from. And I'll tell you the truth, the same sanctity that radiated then still radiates today, and that's what gives us the energy and the ability to put up with everything we have to put up with in order to live here. It started right there at the tomb of the patriarchs 3,500 years ago. Okay? Come, let's go back. I think we'll skip the last jump we would take. About 5 minutes up behind us is a very important site, but because of the sun and the heat, and we don't want anybody to pass out, so we'll talk about it here, and we won't go up there. It's a very important site. One of the things that I mentioned here when we started was that there are 3 names to the neighborhood. And one of them I called Admot Ishai, which is translated as the lands of Ishai. These excavations that we found that I showed you, I told you there was something missing. What was missing is from 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago, there was a very important person living here. Actually, he was so important that he was named after me. Okay? Because if you remember, it's written in the beginning of the 2nd book of Samuel that after King Saul was killed in the war, God says to David that he should go up into the hills of Judea. And David says, but where? And God says, Hebron. So David, being a good, God-abiding Jew, does what he was told to do when he comes to live in Hebron. Down here in the excavations, we didn't find too much from the Davidic period from 3,000 years ago, because the archaeologists think that David built the original city of David on the highest point in Tel Hebron, which is about just above us, less than a 5-minute walk up above us, at a site that is today called the tomb of Jesse and Ruth. And they think that if we dug up there, they would find not only the city of David, but his palace. That's what Tzippi mentioned to you a little bit earlier, what her father used to say, why he lived here, because he was living on top of King David's palace. Okay, there aren't too many people in the world that have the privilege to be able to say that. The site up there today is called the tomb of Jesse. Jesse, of course, was King David's father, and Ruth we know about also. She was King David's great-grandmother. A very, very important site, a very holy site, a little further up from here. And that's why we call this Admot Ishai, the lands of Ishai, the lands of Jesse. Because Jesse lived here. I also have to add that King David lived here for 7.5 years before he went up to Jerusalem. In other words, he started in Hebron. He started where the forefathers were, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and taking that spirituality, he was then able to go up to the sanctity of Jerusalem, but first starting here where the roots are.